Good morning, everyone. Let's try that again. Good morning, everyone. Nice. I feel like we got to be like Muhammad Ali ready, y'all, this morning. We got to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. I am the minister here at Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm the Reverend William Levwood, affectionately known as Rev Lev. My pronouns are he and him. You can't say that in some parts of the government now, so we're going to say it even louder. My pronouns. It's been a week. It's going to be another week, I'm sure, in the coming weeks. So reminder to silence your phones, and whether you're joining us in person or online, as we always do, let's take a deep breath as we center ourselves for worship. We open and welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land who live on and their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomic Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing so that all, together, shall one day know full justice. And speaking of justice, we've been singing this chant about preparing ourselves to be a sanctuary since November. We've done it a couple times now. And then there's another verse about being a revolutionary. So we're going to sing that in a second. Brad's going to lead us. And I just want to emphasize, these are our tasks right now. To be a sanctuary for each other, for those in need. Call your people more right now for your own support and to support them. And we need to be a sanctuary for the most vulnerable among us, which then brings us to the next part, that we're also called to be revolutionaries seeking justice, working for justice. So we're going to sing those things right now. Brad's going to lead us.
Love, please make me a revolutionary, fueled with fury, bold the call with compassion. We will take action, seeking justice for all.
Welcome to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. I don't know about you, but this is where I need to be today. So thank you all for being here with me. I'm Christina Watts. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm happy to be your worship associate today. Whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer or something in between, we encourage you to stay for our social hour, online or in person, immediately after the service. We're so delighted that you decided to join us today. Welcome.
Well. Here we are. I just want to start out by saying that Beyonce got Album of the Year, Country Album, and Album of the Year for a Grammy, finally. Kendrick Lamar, who I listened to on my commute this morning, won in all the categories he was nominated for. And Doechii was the third woman to get Rap Album of the Year. So it's not all bad news, y'all. We got to find our hope and our support where we can. I listened to some Doechii this week. I recommend it. You know, maybe not for the kids, but it's a good beat. And also some Coltrane. I needed some Coltrane this week. You know, so whatever that is for you, that brings you sustenance and inspiration and support, make sure you're doing that extra. There's a story about a rabbi who tells his congregant that he prays for an hour every day, and the congregant says, well, that's all fine and good, Rabbi, but what about when life is really hard and you're just too busy and there's just too much going on? He says, that's a good point. The rabbi says, that's a good point. On those days, I pray for 2 hours. So we got to take care of ourselves. That's the point. And I want to just point out, we have been preparing, right? We were talking about the religious right and the anti-democratic designs of Christian nationalists in August, preparing to try to keep this administration out of office in August, right? We were talking about deep listening, which is how we reach across the aisle in October, okay? We were talking about repair in November. We were talking last month about story, about the fact that our life stories, our personal stories are sacred, and no one can take that away from us, and about our foundational stories, about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision of a movement centered in love and active nonviolent resistance, and about our foundational UU assertion that all people have the potential for goodness, and this is a good world if we collaborate with nature and with each other to make it a good world where every single person can thrive and flourish. So we're bringing all of that work and those core stories with us into this time. We are prepared. We can do this. We can do hard things, as the podcast. Y'all listen to that podcast, some of y'all? That's a good podcast. We can do hard things. So we're going to do hard things. Last Sunday, I don't remember what we talked about, y'all. This is a time when I tell you what I review, I can't remember this moment. But this Sunday, we're going to talk about how we need to use our voices, and we need to show up, and also we need to be strategic, especially for those of us who are in vulnerable populations, and those of us who are government workers. I was thinking today, WWAFD, what would Anthony Fauci do? If you're a government worker, that might be your mantra, like in a tough political moment, how do you still show up for the common good skillfully and strategically? WWAFD. So with that, all of this call to show up and be out loud and proud about who we are for the sake of ourselves and for others, and also to keep it quiet as it's kept when we need to be strategic for the sake of those most vulnerable and the common good. All of this is rooted in our assertion that every person has a right to thrive and flourish with dignity. We invite everyone to the table. So with that, I invite you to join us. Please rise in body or in spirit. It's number 188.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no care of and of despair. Come, yet again come.
Good morning. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Michelle Anderson. I use the pronouns she and her, and I am your new Children and Youth Spiritual Development Director. So I'm excited to be here with you. I've been a member for many, many years, and it's great to be on staff now. So the story I have to share with you today is called Strictly No Elephants. It's written by Lisa Mancho, and it's illustrated by Taeyeon Yu. The trouble with having a tiny elephant for a pet is that you never quite fit in. No one else has an elephant. Every day I take my elephant for a walk. His is a very thoughtful sort of walk. He doesn't like the cracks in the sidewalk very much. I always go back and help him over. That's what friends do. Lift each other over the cracks. Today, I'm walking my tiny elephant to number 17. It's Pet Club Day, and everyone will be there. Come along. There's a good boy. I coax him the last few feet. It'll be fine. But when I look up, there's a sign on the door. Strictly no elephants. My tiny elephant leads me back to the sidewalk, never minding the cracks. That's what friends do. Brave the scary things for you. Did you try to go to the pet club meeting too? The girl asks. Yes, I say, but they don't allow elephants. The sign didn't mention skunks, the girl says. But they don't want us to play with them either. They don't know any better, I tell her. He doesn't stink, the girl adds. No, he doesn't, I agree. What if we start our own club? Come along, I say, making certain that my tiny elephant follows. You can say it with me, because that's what friends do. Never leave anyone behind. Yes. You can play here, says one of our new friends. So we just paint our own sign. It says, all are welcome. My tiny elephant will give you directions if you need them. Because that's what friends do. Thank you.
Standing for the courage to be who we are. Courage to be who we are. We are saying in the memory of those who have fallen, those who have fallen, those who have fallen. We are saying in the memory of those who have fallen, singing for the courage to be who we are. Courage to be who we are. Ooh, 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 courage to be who we are.
And then we light one more candle for all the joys and sorrows which remain in the sanctuaries of our hearts. May this continue to be a community where we show up for each other in all the ways we need to show up.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open.
Our reading today is called The Jewel. by James Arlington Wright. There is this cave in the air behind my body that nobody is going to touch. A cloister, a silence, closing around a blossom of fire. When I stand upright in the wind, my bones turn to dark emeralds.
I think this might be the only poem I've ever set to memory. There is this cave in the air behind my body that nobody is going to touch. A silence, a cloister. I forgot it, y'all. A cloister, a silence closing around a blossom of fire. When I stand upright in the wind, my bones turn to dark emeralds. I sometimes pair it with that chant, I know this rose will open. I have a Anglican rosary that a friend of mine, a chaplain colleague and close friend, made for me. It doesn't have any Christian symbolism on it. It has roses. So when I get to the big rose, I say the poem, and when I do the beads, I sing, I know this rose will open. Again, I encourage you to use whatever spiritual practices that you have to support yourself in these times. There is this cave in the air behind my body that nobody is going to touch, a cloister, a silence, closing around a blossom of fire. Now is a time when we need to be unafraid, or afraid and yet courageous, or both unafraid and courageous at the same time. It is possible to be both at the same time. Unafraid because there is a cave in the air behind my body that nobody is going to touch. I am unafraid because of this part of me that nobody can touch, that nobody can violate. Our first UU principle, which was the guide for UUs for 40 years, affirmed the inherent worth and dignity of every person. There's this cave in the air behind my body that nobody is going to touch. A cloister, a silence closing around a blossom of fire. Our new UU value of equity has nearly the same language. We declare that every person is inherently worthy and has the right to flourish with dignity, love, and compassion. There is a cave in the air behind our bodies that nobody is going to touch. Our new UU value of pluralism says the same thing in new language. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. There is this cave in the air behind my body that nobody is going to touch, a cloister, a silence, closing around a blossom of fire. Howard Thurman, mentor to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and to so many civil rights leaders, put it this way, speaking from his prophetic Christian faith in 1949 in his essay, Jesus and the Disinherited, which I shared some of with you on Christmas Eve. The core of the analysis of Jesus is that the person is a child of God, the God of life that sustains all of nature and guarantees all the intricacies of the life process itself. The awareness of being a child of God tends to stabilize the ego and results in new courage, fearlessness, and power. A person's conviction that he is God's child automatically tends to shift the basis of their relationship with all their fellows They recognize at once that to fear another person, whatever may be that person's power over us, is a basic denial of the integrity of our very life. There is this cave in the air behind my body that nobody is going to touch. A cloister, a silence, closing around a blossom of fire. Because of this, because of the inherent worth and dignity of every person, because every person is inherently worthy and has the right to flourish with dignity, love, and compassion, because we are all sacred beings, because we are all children of God. Because of this, we are unafraid. We know this rose will open. We know our fear will burn away. We know our souls will unfurl their wings. There is this cave in the air behind my body that nobody is going to touch, a cloister, a silence closing around a blossom of fire. But there is also a body, a tender, fragile, vulnerable body that anyone can touch, can attack with violence, can censor and restrain, imprison, torture, kill. Howard Thurman speaks to the power of this fear. He tells us it is instructive to inquire into the effects of fear on the disadvantaged. Fear becomes acute in the form of panic or rage only at the moment when what has been threat becomes actual violence. But the mere anticipation of such an encounter is overwhelming simply because the odds are basically uneven. So the disadvantaged person knows that in any conflict, they must deal not only with the particular individual involved, but also with the entire group in that moment or later. Even recourse to the arbitrary law tends to be avoided because of the fear that the interpretations of law will be biased on the side of the dominant group. Don't we feel that fear now? We are right to be afraid, and we are called to be courageous. Because Howard Thurman also reminds us that this fear eats away at our self-respect. If you were here last Sunday, you may remember that I shared Sharon Welch, a UU theologian, drawing on the wisdom found in the literature of black women, who wrote that one of the most important aspects of resistance, of further work for justice, is the creation and maintenance of self-respect in the face of people and institutions who violate a people's sense of self-worth. You might remember, if you were here last Sunday, that I said we would explore this more this Sunday. Because one of the most important aspects of resistance, of further work for justice, is the creation and maintenance of self-respect in the face of people and institutions who violate our sense of self-worth. We are right to be afraid, and we must be courageous in the face of this fear. Rebecca Solnit, writing this week in The Guardian, reminds us that this administration wants us to be afraid. She writes, right now, already in many institutions and communities, there's pressure to shut up and toe the Trump line. She continues, something that should be said more often is that the reason authoritarians are authoritarians is that they're unpopular. They have to use the threat of force along with intimidation and suppression tactics to get their way. They endeavor to scare people into obeying. They want us to be afraid because they don't really have as much power as they are trying to make us believe they have. In truth, they only have as much power as they're able to scare us into giving them. Now, I'm not saying there's nothing to be afraid of. There is this cave in the air behind my body and your body that nobody is going to touch. A cloister, a silence, closing around a blossom of fire. But there is also a body, a tender, fragile, vulnerable body that I'll say again, anyone can touch, can attack with violence, can censor and restrain, imprison, torture, even kill. And some of us are in more danger than others. If you are transgender or gender nonconforming, there may be times and places where you need to hide parts of your identity to be safe, to keep your psyche and your body safe, to stay alive. If you are an undocumented immigrant, there may be times and places where you need to hide parts of your identity to be safe, to keep your psyche and your body safe, to stay alive. If you are a government worker, there may be times and places where you need to hide parts of your identity to be safe, to keep your job so you can continue to financially support yourself and your family, or to keep your job so that you can continue to do what you can to protect the most vulnerable through the work that you do. This administration wants to scare you into resigning. They want to make it so miserable that you can't bear to stay and keep doing the work. They've been explicit about that. And I can't tell you that you must stay. Maybe you need to leave for your own well-being, or maybe because you can do more good somewhere else in some other job. But for some of you, it may be that the most loving and courageous thing for you to do is to stay in that job, to decide what you can put up with, what you can comply with, even though your whole being may shout within you that it's wrong. Because staying and hiding is how you are able to protect the most vulnerable among us. Sometimes, as I spoke about last Sunday, it's about what I call making good soil. This is from Sharon Welch again. Sometimes our resistance isn't about winning in this moment, because sometimes we can't. And losing isn't always noble. Sometimes it's just stupid. Sometimes losing isn't courageous, it's foolhardy. Sometimes choosing a losing battle so that we can still feel that good feeling of self-respect, so that we can protect our own dignity, is condemning those more vulnerable than us to greater suffering. Making good soil is about remembering that sometimes the best we can do with the power we have is the creation of a matrix for further resistance. Sometimes responsible action means taking a hit when taking that hit helps create a matrix for further resistance, makes good soil for good trouble in the future. Sharon Welch tells us that the extent to which an action is an appropriate response to the needs of others is constituted as much by the possibilities it creates as by its immediate results. So sometimes, if we're one of the most vulnerable, like transgender folks right now, like undocumented immigrants right now, you may need to hide your light under a bushel so that your light can keep shining at all. And if you're a government worker who isn't as directly at risk, you may still need to toe the Trump line in some ways, strategically, so that you can continue to do good work that protects the most vulnerable. Maybe not as much as you want to protect them, but better than if you weren't there. And also, at the same time, you need to decide when not to comply, when to resist, when to stay in your job and refuse to follow orders that are illegal or immoral or both. So I'm not saying there is nothing to be afraid of, but there is this cave in the air behind my body that nobody is going to touch. A cloister, a silence, closing around a blossom of fire. And when I stand upright in the wind, my bones turn to dark emeralds. When I stand upright in the wind, my bones turn to dark emeralds. I want to close with an extended passage from Rebecca Solnit's essay from The Guardian earlier this week. She wrote, "Everyone with any capacity to do so should join things. Call politicians, support the groups and campaigns protecting the most vulnerable. But it's also important," Solnit writes, "to not limit our sense of what resistance looks like. In addition to these formal, structured ways of defending what you believe in, there are ways of doing so woven into everyday life and our conversations and communications. Each of us needs to stand on principle loudly whenever, wherever we can. Used strategically, our voices can do a lot to preserve anti-authoritarian worldviews about facts, science, history, rights, justice, and inclusion. In this moment, it matters to just be a person who, wherever the opportunity arises, affirms that climate crisis is real and climate solutions benefit us all. That immigrants are vital to our economy and their rights matter. That trans people harm no one by their existence, but face terrible harm." Did anybody see the transgender woman on The View who said there's about 1% of the US population that's transgender, and they are not why groceries are expensive or any other of the things that you might have voted Trump into office to address? She said, "I think we were focused on the wrong 1%. Amen, right? Amen. So we need to be willing to show up wherever and wherever the opportunity arises and say that diversity strengthens enterprises and communities in our country, that women's rights and equality should be non-negotiable. Right now, already in many institutions and communities," Solnit writes, "there's pressure to shut up and toe the Trump line. Every person who doesn't do so makes it easier and safer and more encouraging for others to likewise dissent. The more we stand up, the more others will stand up too. By standing up, you're inviting others to join you, making it safer to be a dissenter. And those not ready to join you will maybe question their facts or fear or allegiance to the Trump agenda. The more we stand up, the harder it is for this authoritarian agenda to succeed, and the more uncomfortable we make it for those going along with the lies and the cruelty. We show them our pain." She continues, "Something that should be said more often is that the reason authoritarians are authoritarians is that they're unpopular. They have to use the threat of force along with intimidation and suppression tactics to get their way. They endeavor to scare people into obeying, whether or not they agree, and not being scared and not obeying helps demonstrate how finite their power is and how much of ours remains even in the bleakest of circumstances." She calls us to call lies, lies, call cruelty, cruelty, call fascism, fascism, call violations of the Constitution and human rights by their true names. She writes, "Be loud when you can. Not going along with it, not pretending this is normal, not pretending human rights violations are anything but, not forgetting that the regime is attempting to make epic and unprecedented changes that dismantle our democracy. That's up to us. Not only with how we organize and act, but how we talk and how boldly we talk. And then SoulNet gives us this image for what we are called to do right now. It's the sanctuary and the revolutionary all in one. She gives us this image. A reindeer cyclone is when a herd of reindeer facing a predator put the calves in the center and whirl around fast, making it difficult to impossible for the predator to pick off even one reindeer. SoulNet reminds us the more of us who speak up, the harder it will be to persecute any single person who says trans rights are human rights or what's being done to immigrants is terrorism. Every time we dissent, we make room for others to dissent. Courage, as well as fear, is contagious. Courage, too, is contagious. Don't forget that for a lot of us right now, we get to choose. And what we choose has an impact on what others choose. Now is the time to be unafraid, or afraid and courageous, or both at the same time, because of the inherent worth and dignity of every person, because every person is inherently worthy and has the right to flourish with dignity, love, compassion, because we are all sacred beings, because we are all children of God. Because of this, we know this rose will open. We know our fears will burn away. We know our souls will unfurl their wings. You might have memorized it by now, I don't know. There is this cave in the air behind my body that nobody is going to touch. A cloister, a silence, closing around a blossom of fire. When I stand upright in the wind, my bones turn to dark emeralds. Say that part with me. When I stand upright in the wind, my bones turn to dark emeralds. Call your legislators. Urge them to resist this takeover of our democracy. But don't stop there. Tell your friends and family members to do the same. We need a movement. We need the rainbow cyclone. We need the rainbow cyclone and the reindeer cyclone. Talk boldly and loudly and courageously so that others will feel safe enough to be inspired to do the same. When we stand upright in the wind, our bones turn to dark emeralds. When we stand upright in the wind together, our bones turn to dark emeralds. May it be so, and may we be among those who make it so. Amen, 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 and blessed be.
To ask? You told me.
Yes. I said it was unanimous.
Yes. Well, thank you. It is an honor. And I haven't been up here in years, so this beloved community that grew me into a Unitarian Universalist and that planted the seed and has planted many seeds of ministers. I was thinking as I came in late today, I was channeling my adult from 20 years ago. You all taught me how to wear my best jeans and come to church. And I was often late.
I don't have the excuse that I used to. They're no longer 5, 3, and 1. But I did have to park out onto the street. It was a wonderful feeling. But the only other thing I want to say is one of the first things my family was involved in is the garden. My 3-year-old and my 1-year-old helped replant bulbs. But I didn't know at that time that this is wonderful soil. Yes. This is soil that plants a community, that makes sure that we fight for the inherent justice and dignity of all. Yes. So thank you for putting your faith in me as a minister. You all grew me. Yes. So I am honored.
Well, damn! And I'm not just saying that because it's a Kendrick Lamar song. Damn, that sounded like a minister, y'all!
Congratulations, Brenna. Please rise now in body or in spirit and join in our closing words. As we extinguish our chalice, I invite you to join me now in our community blessing with these words of David Bumbaugh, slightly adapted. This church is dedicated to the proposition that by celebrating our differences and embracing our diversity, we honor the unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness to that unity. Now that we've gathered together in this welcoming and inclusive spiritual home, let us go out into the world nourished, rejuvenated, and inspired to share our values.